Thank you to everyone for coming today to celebrate the class of 2023. This is an exceptionally gifted group of people who I have been proud to call my colleagues and friends. I wish that today I could offer a series of platitudes and well wishes, add to the pile of congratulations you all will undoubtedly receive, and we can all go about our lives. But that is no longer the world we live in. Medicine is weaker than we found it 4 years ago. Treatments themselves have not lost their efficacy, but the intentional sowing of distrust against medical professionals during the COVID pandemic and the increasingly barbaric restrictions of reproductive rights have left us less able to help the patients and communities we serve. I am tired of hearing that we went to school in unprecedented times. We did not go to school in unprecedented times. We went to school in disastrous times. The scale of human casualties from the pandemic was unfathomable, but there were very specific forces that increased the number of those casualties, weren't there? The first patient I ever saw died from COVID-19 unvaccinated. The second patient I saw died from COVID-19 unvaccinated. The third patient I saw died from COVID-19 unvaccinated. Each of these deaths well into a period when vaccinations were not only readily available, but encouraged by every legitimate medical organization in the world. Each of those patients, until their intubation, had on a particular news network in their hospital room that downplayed the dangers of COVID and stoked fears about the risks of vaccination. You all are welcome to one guess what news network it was. It was an organized effort to do nothing that resulted in our country's death toll outpacing every other nation on the planet. 1.1 million people died in the United States from COVID and its complications. We have 4% of the world's population and 16% of its COVID deaths. Now, I know that statistics have in so many ways lost their ability to shock us, but that is an astonishing figure. The most conservative estimates suggest that more than 300,000 of those deaths could have been prevented with vaccination. And I would argue hundreds of thousands more if basic concern for the safety of others had not been so immediately politicized. A virus entered our lives and took from us a great deal, but it was the enemies of public health that may have produced a higher death toll than the pathogen itself. Like the botulinum toxin or the Fimbriae of E. coli, it is not enough for you to know that these forces exist and that they are dangerous. You must understand how they function. From one patient's mouth, I heard all three of the following. COVID is a bioweapon made in a Wuhan lab. COVID isn't dangerous, it's just like the cold. And COVID isn't real at all. Now, while none of those is true, they certainly can't all be true. And while we may look at this person's conspiracy theories and say they make no sense, that doesn't really matter to the person that believes them. The goal of those that disseminate anti-scientific propaganda is not to make sense. The goal is to appeal to our basest instincts, inflame the frustrations we all feel, and ensure our most regrettable dispositions fibrose in place, all the more ready to consume the next dangerous lie, however contradictory it was with the last. This system of belief functions like a lens. It is not, as the odd YouTube video lying about deaths following vaccination will tell you, that you have to see it to believe it. It's just the opposite. You have to believe it to see it. These videos, seen by millions and reposted by tens of thousands, don't just argue against specific medical interventions, they attack the legitimacy of medicine as a whole. But attacks also came from voices that did not directly endorse these conspiracies, but rather did everything in their power not to correct them. These were the media personalities like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and Tucker Carlson, who gave airtime to the opinions of disgraced scientists and hate mongers, and then cowered behind the defense of free speech, as if there were no difference between can and should. This was the now owner of Twitter, Elon Musk, who for some reason felt the need to weigh in and claim the cure is worse than the disease, which is a wretched, deadly lie. The rhetorical positioning used by these individuals is in many ways more sophisticated than the blustering efforts found on the far corners of the internet. There is one particularly concerning example that I hope will prove my point. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, my birth state, for what it's worth, said that nurses ought not be required to get vaccinated because, quote, some of them are trying to have families. Now, he does not explicitly endorse the circulating, baseless, deadly claim that vaccines affect fertility, but for those listening for a dog whistle, he has won their obedience. This strategy functions like a perfume ad on television. He offers no actual information about the product, but he does tell you how to feel about it. This man chose to legitimize a deadly medical lie rather than have to contradict his supporters' brittle worldview. Speaking to a group of college students at a point when tens of thousands of Floridians had already died, DeSantis mocked these students for wearing masks and social distancing and called it COVID theater. Well, I had season tickets to COVID theater, and it was a goddamn tragedy in every act. The first tragedy was the loss of those before we could offer the best help and prevention. The second tragedy was the loss of folks that were told that help was poison. And the third tragedy is the effect this rhetoric has had on people I love and used to respect. It is an awful thing to watch a patient's body weaken and tire as they take their last breath. An awful thing. It is somehow worse to hear a loved one exhale their last compassionate thought before beginning in on a series of hateful regurgitations about how we have to think about the effect this is all going to have on the markets, or about how we need to prioritize the healthy over the vulnerable. People made their decisions and knew the risks, continues the voice on the other side of the phone, but the reality is that we were never really rolling the same dice. COVID outcomes were stratified by race and class due to the inequities in our medical system, and because of that, this virus killed discriminately, with Black Americans 57% more likely to die than their white counterparts with the same disease. So when some argue from positions of comfort and safety that they are okay with the risks, what they're exposing is nothing less than a willingness to trade the lives of others for the return of their own convenience. Speaking with an 8th grader during a virtual summer camp about COVID, she said, "I fear for the future of humanity if we continue this bitter behavior." Yeah, me too, Cassie. It would take us decades to fully process the events of the last years, but we don't have decades to process the last public health crisis. The next public health crisis is here now. Denying a patient their right to abortion care in the developed country with the single greatest chance of death during labor and delivery is moral bankruptcy. Once again, we see our opposition gaining points in a culture war at the expense of the tens of thousands whose lives will be ended or ruined because a wedge has been driven between care and those who need it. Once again, this will be felt most by those who have been helped the least. And once again, it's those same voices, isn't it, The same governors and the same talking heads who just let us off a cliff have now taken it upon themselves to restrict care and cost lives. But hey, probably not their lives. The enemies of public health are strong and capable. Behind the thinly veiled guise of hoaxy good intentions is a well-oiled propaganda machine that just showed us the scale of catastrophe it is capable of producing. I know that what we are facing is enough to scare the bravest of us, but more terrifying still is the prospect of a life lived in apathy toward the suffering of others. It is this generation of physicians that will be forced to hold the line of truth, choice, and dignity. We are trained to speak very cautiously about things we understand well, while our opposition is rewarded for speaking with wild confidence about things they do not understand at all. Friends, you graduate today not only with dexterous hands, but with an informed voice that must be raised as loud as you can make it on behalf of those that need you. It is time for us to decide what we are about. Our days as ambitious undergraduates are long gone. We are servants of our communities now, nothing more and nothing less. And it is because of that that you must speak with the authority that you have earned at the level of the single patient's care and at the level of community health. The hesitation you feel in doing so will not be shared by those speaking against you. With the grim landscape around us, the courage I have seen in you is a sliver of hope for the future of our profession and for our democracy. Rise to this occasion. Keep your hearts on fire and your brains on ice. Good luck.